The passage we're about to hear is a pivotal passage in the Gospel of Mark and often seen as a turning point in Jesus' ministry. Written around the year 70 of the Common Era, the Gospel of Mark addresses a community experiencing persecution and upheaval following the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So it's with that framework in mind, it's clear that it invites its readers, including us, to consider our place in a larger picture. And this isn't some academic or remote question. It's like those in Mark's community. We too are facing persecution of the most vulnerable among us. And we're witnessing the upheaval being caused as a nation is being slowly destroyed by its own government. I invite you now to hear these timely words from Mark's account.
Mark 8:27 through 35. Peter's declaration about Jesus. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Jesus foretells his death and resurrection. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are getting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any wish to come after me, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. Those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it."
One of my favorite all-time quotes comes to us from the pen of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." In other words, our past experiences, our those future events that are beyond our control, are insignificant compared to what lies within us, what lies within our hearts. I think that I like this quote so much because it has the potential to begin a discussion about character. And isn't that what Mark's talking about here? Character. If any wish to come after me, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Yes, this is a classic call to discipleship, but it's also an invitation to consider what the character of an individual or even a church might look like. I mean, as a church, as we're living through this very dark moment in history, will we or have we taken up our metaphorical cross? In this time of unprecedented attacks against the least of God's beloved, are we as a community able to recognize the capacity for compassion that lies within us? And are we, as the storyteller implores us, are we able to keep our minds on the goodness of God, as opposed to our human tendency to let our fear or apathy rule the day? You know, I heard a speaker this last week who really illuminated these questions. The speaker said that there are two kinds of churches, and he put them into two categories. He said a church is either a fear of the world kind of church, or it's a love your neighbor kind of church. Fear the world or love your neighbor. So what did he mean by that? Well, the fear of the world churches are just that, fearful. Peering around every corner, they're suspicious of anything deemed secular or worldly. They're afraid of anything that might be new or different and are ready to demean or destroy anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Fear is the driving force behind Christian nationalism. But then he said there's another kind of community, the love your neighbor kind of church. Love your neighbor churches don't look at the secular world as a threat, but rather as an opportunity to connect, an opportunity to love other people, an opportunity to grow and learn more about the world around us. And that's finally a matter of character. This type of inner character that calls us, challenges us to love our neighbor. But how do we know what that calling looks like in the real world? How do we really live into, loving our neighbor? Well, I'm going to offer just 2 words to answer that question today. Sacred journey. Mary Oliver put it like this. Little by little, she said, we need to leave all of those negative voices behind. And when we do that, when we filter out all of that white noise, we begin to hear a new voice, one which we slowly recognize as our own. And it's this sacred journey, this discovery or rediscovery of our inner character that leads us towards the divine. Because you see, that slowly recognizable voice that we hear down on the inside, that voice is finally the still small voice of God. The still small voice that's within us. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Which brings us back around to Mark. If any of you wish to come after me, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Jesus is inviting all of us here, folks. Jesus is inviting us to embark on a sacred journey, an inward voyage that leads to an outward expression of love. And specifically, Jesus is inviting each of us to take up our cross of humility. Take up our cross of humility because whatever our nationality, whatever our skin color or race or creed, whatever our sexual orientation or gender identity, whatever our immigration status, all people matter. No one, I can't be more specific here, absolutely no one is excluded from God's love. And furthermore, Jesus is inviting us here to take up our cross of faith as we summon the courage to navigate this darkness that's currently shrouding our nation. And he's inviting us also to take up the cross of compassion by using our presence and our voices to protest the abductions and killings of those living among us. And finally, Jesus is inviting us to take up our cross of service as we continue to reach out beyond ourselves, sharing bread, sharing hope, sharing life. My friends, as your sacred journey continues, may you find the peace and the grace and the love that God has so richly blessed all of us with. And as you serve the least of God's people, may you do so with love and compassion and grace. And finally, may God bring healing to this nation and indeed to all the corners of the globe. Amen. And this Love Your Neighbor church said, Amen.